Well, I turned 70 in September. That's a big one. I buried many men who were 70 in my life who I thought were pretty doggone old, I can tell you that. When I was 25, if someone had told me they could guarantee me 70 years, or I could take my chances for the next 45 years, I would have taken the 70. So it's all gravy from here on, I suppose. Speaking of birthdays, there are many awful things about social media, but one of the best things is all the birthday wishes you get. You hear from people you do not typically hear from. I try to read and acknowledge each greeting, but I'm sure I miss some. Because I have some Facebook friends who are more acquaintances than real friends, I sometimes click on the names to see how I know them. I can usually figure that out fairly quickly by looking at our mutual friends, where they live, and what they do. Your birthday can be busy if you're active on social media like me. But this year, the real celebration occurred a week after my birthday on September 27th. And trust me, my wife went all out. Without my knowledge and with a bit of help from her brother, Kathy pulled off the best birthday celebration ever. Her first hurdle was getting all our kids and grandkids together in one place at the same time with all their busy schedules. That is a job in itself. She somehow checked that box. The place was Truist Park in Atlanta. Next, she had to find 16 tickets together on a Friday night at a sold-out game with the Braves fighting for a playoff spot, and secure 4 parking passes in the same parking deck. She checked those boxes. But the hurdle she did not expect when she began planning this months ago was a monster hurricane named Helene, heading directly toward us and later to Atlanta the morning of the scheduled party. There would have been no birthday celebration if Helene had not veered eastward right before it got to us. Although we knew we had escaped what we were expecting, when we returned from the game, we saw the extent of property damage and even loss of life in our neighboring Georgia counties east of us. All that puts baseball games and birthday parties in their proper perspective. But back to Kathy's Herculean effort and plans she put in place long before a hurricane threat. In addition to all the tickets and parking passes, she got us 4 passes to go on the field to watch batting practice before the game. I haven't asked, but I think her brother, a neighbor and friend of Braves manager Brian Snicker, helped with that. And maybe the biggest surprise was she paid for all this without my knowledge. And it was a bobblehead night. Since it was the last season series, attendees had numerous Braves to choose from. We even had a couple of extra general admission tickets, so we secured a couple of extra bobbleheads. Our group of 16 would leave with enough bobbleheads to open a bobblehead store. Did I mention that a representative from the Braves came to my seat during the game to give me 2 more bobbleheads and lead the happy birthday song with almost the entire section singing to me? It was a birthday for the ages, and I'm left with how I will ever come close to this in 4 months when she hits the big 70. I am easy to reach if anyone has suggestions. But my wife definitely gets the Birthday Party Planner of the Year award, or maybe the decade. And speaking of decades, I've just begun my 8th one of those. And here's a look back at what it's been like for me for my first 7 decades, and a little peek into the next one that is hopefully coming up.
Viewing life from a hearse, it could be worse. Laugh, think, and cry with the country undertaker.
1954 to 1964. I don't remember much about the first 4 or 5 years, but things picked up quickly after that. My life revolved around church, school, and baseball. By the time that decade ended, I had completed kindergarten and the first 4 grades at Reynolds Elementary School and learned to read, write in cursive, do basic math, and cut up way too much. Also, I had sat on Jim Brewer's little boy board to make myself taller in his barber's chair, experienced death in the loss of my grandmother, the assassination of a president of the United States, and watched the Beatles debut on the Ed Sullivan Show. I'd already met people who would be my friends for the rest of my life. Although I did not know it then, I was growing up in a wonderful family in the perfect town, surrounded by outstanding teachers and other adults who knew me well and looked after my best interest. By the time that decade ended, 2 of my 3 siblings had gone away to college. One graduated and married his high school sweetheart. I got around fine on my bicycle, stayed out until the street lights came on, slept in my socks, and fought with my brother George. I played organized baseball at the Reynolds Little League and many pickup games in the backyard, and collected and traded baseball cards. I had girls who were friends, but no hormones flowing yet that would encourage me to have a girlfriend. In fact, at my brother's wedding a few months before I began my 10th year, I was horrified to think I had to escort girls with their arms in mine to their pews the day of the wedding. 1964 to 1974. I worked at our grocery store on the weekends and daily during the summer, learned how to cut up a chicken, break down a side of beef, make change at the cash register, and calculate the retail price from the wholesale cost. For a year or so, I ran a hot dog stand in the store where I bought the hot dogs, buns, and condiments, cooked and sold hot dogs for the price I set, kept the books, paid a percentage of the profits to the store, and kept the rest. When I got my driver's license, I purchased a used push-button Plymouth and paid for it in cash with the money I had saved working. The hormones had begun to flow now. I felt my first boob when slow dancing at a sock hop on the gym floor and played rhythm guitar in a garage band. I got in trouble when I ordered a nudist colony magazine that was supposed to come to me wrapped in inconspicuous brown paper, but was intercepted by our local postmaster, who personally delivered it to my mother. I graduated from the 8th grade in Reynolds and then went on to high school in Fort Valley, where I met an entire group of new friends and a much larger group of beautiful girls. My baseball playing days ended, and my entire sports focus moved to playing basketball and golf. I went on my first death call and learned how to embalm a dead human body. I experienced school integration and met different friends I would have never met if not for it. The fun-loving man who would have been my father-in-law and our children's grandfather died suddenly at 49, devastating his family and all of us who loved him. His unforgettable last words to me 2 days before he died were, "Take care of my daughter," although he did not know he was about to die. Or maybe he did. I graduated high school and entered the University of Georgia in fraternity life, where I was introduced to a world of keg parties, brotherhood, late night, early morning bull sessions, all-night card games, Georgia football, band parties, more beautiful girls than I could ever imagine, college classes where the professor could not care less if you attended, and more people who would be my friends for the rest of my life. By the time this decade ended, I had met and dated the girl who would become my wife and the mother of my children, and dribbled a basketball buck naked down the middle of one of the busiest roads in Athens. The former had nothing to do with the latter, and it is a miracle the latter did not prevent the former from ever taking place. 1974 to 1984. During this decade, I became an emergency medical technician, worked at night as an EMT while in college, graduated from UGA and Gupton Jones College of Mortuary Science, and became a licensed funeral director and embalmer. I returned home to join the family business, where we bought another funeral home in a neighboring county, built a new modern grocery store, built our first home, and ran an ambulance service. I learned in real time that it is easier to borrow money than it is to pay it back. I married my wife, and we had our first 2 children. I worked long hours, had a mortgage payment to pay every month, credit card payments, business loans to pay seemingly every week or two, and stress to deal with at night when I was not on a death call or ambulance call. I found God as an adult, Or more accurately, he found me. He was actually not missing. We got involved in the local Methodist church where I grew up and regularly hosted youth groups at our house. I spent hours studying the Bible, understanding God's incredible grace through Jesus Christ, while grasping the fact that I would never measure up and that he was my only hope. The words in the Bibles that had been difficult and condemning before now jumped off the page and became life to me. I even memorized chunks of it. We joined a church in a neighboring county where my brother had left the family business for a higher calling and had become its pastor. During those years, we met another group of friends who became like family to us. We hosted a small group in our home, ate at the Dairy Queen after church with them almost every Sunday night, and did life with our church family when I was not at the grocery store, going on ambulance calls, death calls, conducting funerals, or running to the restroom. My 97-year-old grandfather, who was a lifelong funeral director, died easily in his easy chair while reading the daily obituaries in the newspaper. I suffered from IBS and indigestion and drank enough Mylanta to sink a small boat till I finally had surgery to fix the problem. That is the indigestion problem. I don't think there's a surgery for the IBS problem. 1984 to 1994, we had our last child and spent much of this decade attempting to raise all three of them to be responsible adults and keep them fed and clothed. I spent many hours at the baseball fields coaching our boys during those formative years and watched helplessly when they started bringing girls home. We sold the grocery store and exited the ambulance business, but I soon opened and managed a furniture business along with the 2 funeral homes. I learned the difference between fine furniture and sorry furniture, and by trial and error, how to measure a house for carpet. I bought my first computer from Radio Shack, wrote letters for the first time using a word processor, and even got exposed to the internet and heard those special words for the first time. You've got mail. Although the internet was the dial-up version and slow, I saw potential, created a web page, advertised the best furniture at unbeatable prices, took online orders, and shipped it to other states. Some customers were unhappy when their furniture arrived damaged in places like New Jersey, so we stuck to locally selling furniture at unbeatable prices. However, many out-of-town customers drove there because of the unbeatable prices. With our kids in school in nearby Butler, they got involved in the youth group at the Baptist church there. We began attending and experienced some beautiful years there with a great group. Now we had another set of friends and created more great memories, including participating in an Easter play, a significant production in the county by the church. Being part of that taught me much and inspired me to be more willing to live outside my comfort zone. During this decade, 2 girls moved in with us at different times. One was a 16-year-old girl who was pregnant and stayed with us until she had her baby. Another was a girl whose parents moved because of his job, and she wanted to finish her senior year in high school. Both are successful adults who we still consider as part of our family and who did much more for us than we ever did for them. I lost another grandmother who was born and married on Christmas Day and died on July the 4th, and had declared to us that she had never seen herself naked. It was towards the end of this decade when my wonderful mother died at the medical center in Macon, and exactly 5 months later, I found my coffee-drinking daddy dead in his home, where he had never used the oven or even made a pot of coffee since her death. I would spend the rest of my life being thankful to God for them, wishing I could have one more conversation and telling others in many places about the impact these 2 people had on my life. 1994 to 2004, I'd begun speaking as a humorist, motivational, and inspirational speaker, and the invitations came so often that sometimes I showed up at the wrong place or day. I sold the funeral businesses, and the company that bought them hired me to work for them. I soon realized I could use all I had learned in a small-town funeral business on a large scale, and I suddenly had new purpose. For most of these years, my area of responsibility was mainly in Georgia. But before this decade was over, I was traveling across the United States with growing responsibility in a publicly traded company and finding restrooms I had never had the pleasure to visit. We had another permanent guest in our home, and this time it was a boy who was a classmate of our kids who lived in a neighboring county. He stayed with us often for convenience and eventually moved in until they graduated. Our kids left home for college, and we cried when they did. Toward the end of these years, after 137 years, we became the last Goddards to live in Reynolds when we left our hometown to move to Warner Robins. We quickly got involved with a church there, much larger than any we had attended, and hosted a small group of young couples in our home on Sunday evenings for several years. We met an entirely different set of friends in a larger town, a new church with more opportunities. With the huge company I was now working for came many new friends and colleagues from different parts of the United States who taught much differently, or maybe I taught much differently from them. My horizons were expanding, and I was learning that great people live in places outside of Reynolds, Georgia. 2004 to 2014, I released my first book early this decade, an expanded version of what I discussed in my speeches. The book would have been twice as long if the editor had not suggested that it would take away from the book's message if I included the bathroom stories. My business travel and speaking travel continued. Also, as I traveled, I ate at many different places, which was not suitable for my IBS condition, but brought on more stories. I wrote a blog at night about interesting people I had known and others I had met along the way. A few of those blog articles comprised my second book. Although our home office was in Houston, Texas, and I was there often, during part of these years my hub was in New York City, where I visited frequently and met a new set of friends in that office who loved to listen to my Southern dialect, or pretend they did. I had much fun exploring that great city and other cities in the northeastern United States. In New England, I began to experience traveling in real snow. I learned when you couldn't back your car out because of deep snow, you get a funny look, a wink, and a reasonable price when you inadvertently knock on the door of a shady massage parlor and ask for a shovel from the lady of the night who answers the door. My mother-in-law moved in with us as she began traveling down the path of dementia and Alzheimer's that would lead to her death. I was shocked the night I came home and noticed who I thought was my wife on my side of the bed. I attempted to move her over to the other side to make room for me, and realized my mother-in-law had gotten in the wrong bed while my wife slept through it. Despite a few mishaps, those were rich years, as I watched up close a daughter serve her mother and tangibly demonstrate the life and love of Jesus. Also during those years, I started rubbing shoulders with some great business leaders who would greatly influence my life and my ability to lead others. Some of those I worked for, and some worked for me. Kathy retired from teaching, and more importantly, we began having grandchildren. My life changed forever when they called me Papa, the best name ever. 2014 to 2024. One consistent theme is that every decade brings change, but some things never change. My responsibility continued to increase at work, and my travel intensified. I spent a week speaking in Canada, went overnight to Mexico to speak at a business conference, and visited a Buddhist monastery in Northern California to attempt to negotiate a business deal. We bought a lake house with large porches, plenty of rocking chairs, and the most beautiful view. We also purchased a pontoon boat, learned to drive it and dock it as we navigated around beautiful Lake Oconee while pulling grandkids and sometimes adults around the lake on large tubes. The place at the lake has been the source of much family fun and entertainment for our children and now 9 grandchildren, and a place of refuge for us. We are thankful we made it through COVID-19, when I know firsthand that many did not. We took a trip of a lifetime to Israel, and we learned the places we had read about in the Bible do exist. I even used some of the scripture I'd memorized a few decades earlier when I teamed up with our guide one evening on the shore of the Sea of Galilee to quote the Sermon on the Mount at the place where Jesus first quoted it. After 20 years of extensive travel, business meetings, conference calls, business decisions, managing and leading people, and airplane rides. I retired at the top of my game from a company that had been really good to me to come home and spend all day, every day with the love of my life while the clock continues to tick. The last few years have been the best yet, and I am most thankful that my wife and I like each other and enjoy being with each other. I can only imagine what it would be like if we didn't. We now spend much more time at doctor appointments, and with that comes more medication. When this decade began, I was taking 0 medications. As this decade ends, I have difficulty keeping up with what I'm supposed to take each day and what I'm not supposed to eat. Though not working, I stay busy to keep my mind working, have time to write stuff like this, and keep up with many friends on Facebook. With a bit of a learning curve and after purchasing the necessary equipment, I became a podcaster to provide a place for people to tell their stories and record for posterity. When we are not keeping up with our busy grandchildren, I still speak occasionally, watch shows like Gunsmoke and Andy Griffith, the Atlanta Braves and Georgia Bulldogs, and walk our little dog, Coney. We go to bed when we want and get up when Coney wants us to get up in the morning. And just like my grandfather, I look every day to make sure my name has not appeared in the obituaries. As I enter my 70s and 8th decade, I am confident that more change is coming, but I would be just fine if it stayed the same. I am incredibly proud of my boys who are now grown men and their beautiful families. I'm grateful for my wife of 47 years, our journey together, my rewarding career, and the friends I've made. I am most thankful for a God who has extended grace to me in all my shortcomings and mistakes and encouraged me to confidently move on despite them. I'm also extremely thankful that all our siblings, my wife and mine, and their spouses are alive. Since none of us are getting younger, health concerns are more evident than ever before. Although I dread the prospect of older age illnesses and losing people who I have been close to all my life, the odds are good that will begin happening. I know I am not promised tomorrow, and other surprises can and most likely will happen. So by the grace of God, I will continue to live one day at a time, love my wife and family, manage my IBS, and trust God with whatever life brings. But just for the record, and God willing, I plan to add another paragraph to this story on September 20th, 2034.
Viewing life from a hearse, it could be worse. Laugh, think, and cry with the country undertaker.